Today, the President of the United States conducted a wide-ranging Oval Office interview with Bloomberg News. Among the topics discussed, a capital gains tax break, the World Trade Organization, tech and social media giants Google, Amazon, and Facebook, the President's feelings about Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and the job security of his embattled Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Joining me from Washington, Bloomberg News Editor-in-Chief John Micklethwait, who helped conduct the interview with President Trump, and here in New York, Bloomberg Businessweek economics editor Peter Coy. Mr. Micklethwait, let me start with you. I have to ask, the mood in the Oval Office. We've been hearing a lot of reports about tension in the White House, particularly in the West Wing. What was it like?
Well, Mark, to be honest, I think I would describe him as kind of ebullient. You know, he was full of confidence, full of energy. As far as he's concerned, he's doing a wonderful job, and the world should hear about it. But he doesn't lack. Self-doubt is not an immediate part of his makeup. So from that angle, I think it'd be fair to say that he's bouncing. He thinks that he has engineered a wonderful economy. He thinks he's winning trade wars. And you can throw in all kinds of buts into those statements, but that's the way he's looking at it.
John, I mentioned a series of topics that were discussed today. There's so many, but let's start with the capital gains tax break, because that caught my eye initially. What are his feelings about that, and why now?
Well, he talked a lot about pondering on this, and it's certainly something he's interested by. He even asked us what we thought about it. I think he has... It fits into his wheelhouse in some way. It's one of those things where he offers, especially to corporate America, something that will keep on making them keen and drawing in. It's obviously not something, and Peter will point this out immediately, it's not something that's going to help many middle-class Americans, but it would be something more kind of red meat for his corporate base, who might be somewhat worried about what's happening to do with trade wars.
And before we get to my colleague Peter Coy, let's hear from the President in his own words, his comments to Bloomberg about capital gains and taxes.
Thinking about it. I'm thinking about
Leaning
it.
towards liking
Well,
it?
no, I just, there are a lot of people that love it, there's some people that don't. But I'm thinking about it very strongly.
Peter, I'm thinking about it very strongly. It didn't sound convincing, but the fact that he threw that out there suggests what?
Well, it's something he has brought up repeatedly. Larry Kudlow's in favor of it. It's an issue that it does, as John Micklethwait pointed out, appeal to his base. And by his base, I mean the top 0.1% of American tax-paying households. He has a broader base that will not probably pay him a lot of attention to this, certainly wouldn't benefit from it. It is that top 0.1% of the households that would get 2/3 of the benefit of a capital gains tax cut done through indexation to inflation.
Peter, when we talk about not the overall base, because the President and his administration have been touting the tax cut ever since that was passed,
Sure.
But now this is something to throw to the other side of the equation here. How much money are we talking about?
No, it's not. It's not one of these large ticket items. I think we're in the like tens of billions of dollars here. Nothing on the scale of the December tax cut, which really was pretty gigantic. It's really kind of more of a symbolic move. Trump continues to want to do something for his key supporters.
John, the President talked to you and our colleagues about the World Trade Organization. He has made no secret that he's not a fan. What's his concern?
Yeah, he said, I think that the WTO was even worse than NAFTA. And I think it's more general than that. I think the fact that he immediately rejected the offer from the Europeans to go to zero tariffs on cars is interesting. He just said that isn't nearly good enough. I want I want a much broader deal than that. Well, I think many Europeans thought this was a sort of big concession by them. And so I think it's part of the same thing. He wants to rewrite sort of trade rules around the world.
And again, from the President of the United States in an interview with Bloomberg News, his feelings on the WTO.
I would say the WTO was the single worst trade deal ever made. And if they don't shape up, I would withdraw from the WTO.
Peter, one of the single worst trade deals ever made.
Well, the World Trade Organization is one of the key institutions that grew out of predecessor organizations, but it's a key building block of the post-World War II order.
But it's the president's made no secret that he believes that the United States gets treated unfairly by the WTO.
Right. So he would say the same thing about the United Nations and International Monetary Fund. It's like, yeah, the U.S. is in a special position in the world. It's the world's most powerful nation, and he doesn't perceive the U.S. as having sort of a special responsibility to the world. He and a large part of his base believe the U.S. has been ill-treated and should be able to pursue its narrow self-interest the same as, say, Guyana or Nigeria or Philippines or any other nation. That would be a big change for the United States to kind of narrow down. In fact, it's what China does now. China has a narrow view of its self-interest. The U.S. has always had a broader view. He wants to be focused just on what will help the U.S. in any given year.
And John, not to be unexpected, the president continued his withering criticism of Jeff Sessions. Makes you wonder how much of this Mr. Sessions can take. What did the president say?
Well, to be fair, he sort of gave in to the idea that Jeff Sessions should remain in his job through the midterms. I suspect under political pressure that just to take that off the table. We did ask him, how many hours after the midterm was he likely to stay, and Trump pushed that away. But Jeff, he made very clear that he wanted Jeff Sessions to do a rather different job to what they're doing at the moment, and that rather predictably involved pursuing Democrat malfeasance. And he talked about them being worse than what had happened on his side to do with Russia and so on.
But this is speaking of holding a grudge, the president has not spoken kindly of Mr. Sessions since he refused to recuse himself from the Russia investigation.
Yes, it does seem to be one of those things where, to me, it's a little bit of a mystery. You have this man who seems to enjoy sort of firing people in a previous incarnation, certainly in his apprentice incarnation. And you have someone like Sessions who was conspicuously driven him slightly mad, and yet he's still there. And I think it goes back to the idea that Sessions was part of the Senate, and he also has some difficulty in finding someone who could immediately replace him.
Peter Coy, the president also talked about auto tariffs. Before I ask you about it, let's hear what the president had to say.
It's not good enough, no.
Not good enough, why?
No, because they do a lot more auto business than we will ever do. In other words, well, first of all, it's not just tariffs. They also have barriers up to our cars. They'll take the barriers down, and they'll charge us no tax. But it's not good enough because they will always sell more cars. Their cars, their habits, their consumer habits are to buying their cars, not to buying our cars.
Peter, the Europeans have not been subtle about this. They're a little bit tired of this criticism coming from the United States.
Well, the point he made about habits is kind of strange. It's like if Germans want to buy a Mercedes or Peugeot or whatever, rather than a Ford or a GM, that's something that is not really subject to trade negotiations. It's always been perceived that as long as you create a level playing field, then you may run a surplus in one category and a deficit in another, but that's the ball game. He seems like if we run a deficit, that's prima facie evidence of a problem.
John Micklethwait, we have about 30 seconds left. The word that you used was ebullient. Did that catch you by surprise?
Slightly. I thought he'd be more on the defensive. I wod very much reiterate what Peter said, is that showing that we agree about everything. I basically said to Trump, look, how on earth can you stop people buying cars they want to buy? It is about playing field, and he just sort of kept on going. But yes, the overall impression is of someone who feels that the world is going in his direction. And that is, for better or worse, that is the president that America has at the moment.